Today we're talking about some massive plans for AEW later this year. Also, in addition to that, some bad news for WWE. More in particular, a TV show that WWE has doesn't seem to be drawing as well as people thought it would. We're going to talk about why that might be. And then also, former world champion not returning to WWE anytime soon. It's all coming up right here on The Ango Show. And of course, as always, if you guys want more videos like this, don't forget to click that subscribe button. This way you can get notified every single time a new video drops on the channel. As you guys know, I keep you updated with everything happening in professional wrestling. So don't miss that opportunity. Ladies and gentlemen, Drew McIntyre has no imminent plans to return to WWE. And according to WrestleVotes, WWE is having Drew McIntyre off of television so that way he can recover from injury. Obviously, WWE doesn't have Drew McIntyre on TV as it currently stands. The guy was going into the feud with Damian Priest beat up, which is obviously concerning, right? It's relatively concerning when you have a guy who just throughout the last year and a half, he's just been grinding and grinding and grinding, and then now he is injured and he's got to take time off. WrestleVote says nothing is in the pipeline recently, which tells him that nothing is imminent. Also, when he is ready, Drew McIntyre probably will be at the top, right? So I think that's obvious, right? I think Drew McIntyre clearly is a guy who is a top guy for the company. This is a guy who is a reliable act for the company. This is a guy who definitely goes into work, kills it in any role, babyface or heel. And I just want to say, like, I have to sing my praises for Drew McIntyre because I think it's very well known that for a long time, a lot of people kind of looked at it as like, man, Drew McIntyre really hasn't had that opportunity to get that really big championship win and such a large reign. But he fills his role so well, especially when you look at his feud with CM Punk and Damian Priest. There was just a lot of great logic implied and involved in that storyline. I think Drew McIntyre eventually will be a world champion. And actually, what I think would be really dope, John Cena's got the belt. If I'm mapping it out, John Cena drops the belt to Cody Rhodes. Eventually, Drew McIntyre returns and he defeats Cody Rhodes, as a heel, and that's where he gets a big championship reign. That's personally what I would like to see. That's the way I would do it. I think that WWE Championship could utilize a little bit of freshness. John Cena dropping the belt to Cody makes the most sense, but then Cody having another big threat from a heel, Drew, makes also more sense. That brings us to our next topic, ladies and gentlemen. Some bad news for WWE LFG. The show is not really performing well for season two. And listen, some people who watch this channel may not watch WWE LFG, and I just want to be perfectly clear before we get into the numbers. WWE LFG season one was a relatively good show. Between the stories and the matches that were happening on the show and having the coach involvement on the show, to me, it just kind of seemed like a really fun reality TV show-esque thing that WWE was doing. And so therefore, I thought I would be actually a little bit more excited for season two, but I'm not. And I'm going to be honest with you guys. The reason for that, I think, is because WWE LFG season two contains several of the same people who didn't win season one, which I understand the format and how they're doing it, but I feel like it's a little too repetitive, and I would like a little bit more freshness incorporated into the show. Now, according to Programming Insider, they've come out and said that the June 22nd, 2025 premiere of the show drew 114,000 overnight viewers with a 0.04 rating in the 18 to 49 demographic. Now, this is down significantly because last season, the show had about 160,000 viewers, and the show finale had 156. So, excuse me. The point that I'm trying to make is that season one had more interest than season two, clearly. Now, what could be the reason for that? Well, season one did have Mickie James as a coach. On season two, she was replaced by Michelle McCool. I don't know if that's necessarily the problem, but I think that clearly could be a problem, right? If you look at it from that perspective of somebody, you know, being on the show in the first season, not being on it in the second season, maybe that's a reason for the drop off. Also, A&E is a very interesting channel. They have a lot of good success with WWE, and they have a lot of WWE content, and they're working very closely with WWE. But how accessible is the A&E channel for everybody? That's a question I really don't know the answer to, so maybe you guys can help me out in the comments. I have the channel, so I'm able to watch it, but I don't know if it's that accessible. And then also, one thing that I found interesting was a dialogue that I saw on Twitter about wrestling content. So, for example, people who enjoy watching wrestling may not also enjoy watching reality TV shows regarding wrestling. So, for example, Brandy and Cody had an AEW reality show, and obviously WWE has their fair share of their own. Plus, we can't forget about WWE Backstage. And I think if you're a wrestling fan, primarily, people just want to watch wrestling. They just want to see weekly content and stuff like that. Maybe people just don't have an interest overall in the idea of LFG or, some of these other things that pertain to outside of the ring. So it is something to pay attention to for sure. But it is kind of alarming because A&E has been very happy with WWE. And also at the same time too, one thing I've noticed is that A&E hasn't really been marketing LFG as much. So I don't know if that's an area for concern, but it is something to pay attention to for sure. Because if it does eventually get canceled, then it gets canceled. Now, last time I talked about WWE LFG, I did mention that A&E renewed the show for like 6 more seasons or 3 more years, 2 seasons per year. So we'll see if this changes anything for sure. And that brings us to our final topic, ladies and gentlemen. AEW has some massive plans. This is the kind of stuff that people are going to be really excited about. I think I'm very excited about it. Because AEW is headed back to the Hammerstein Ballroom. During a Q&A session, WrestleVotes spoke that AEW is planning a return to the Hammerstein Ballroom this December, just like they did last year. This was based on a lot of the feedback. Obviously, AEW got a lot of great positive feedback from going to Hammerstein Ballroom. And to be quite frankly honest with you guys, like if I'm just being genuine, being my truest, genuine self, I know sometimes people don't like the idea of venues being repetitive. However, Hammerstein Ballroom is one where I feel like AEW actually benefited from being there. I feel like that kind of kicked AEW off into like a little bit of a different feel. Because AEW was starting to feel stale. And let's face it, it's been very beneficial for AEW since going there. It kind of feels like, maybe they're restoring the feeling and stuff. And of course, with AEW, really just it's not perfect by any means, but I feel like they've definitely been improving a lot more in the last several months. The fact that they have kind of come out and they are doing more iconic venues or more music theaters or movie theater type things. Like I think those kinds of venues bring a different look to AEW than what you would typically see from WWE. And I think that's been actually really beneficial to the company. So it is something I'm definitely excited to see when they do it. But I'm glad that AEW is doing it in general. I think it's really been beneficial to them. One last thing I want to talk about with Hammerstein Ballroom. There's rumors that WWE was trying to go back there. So we'll have to see if this kind of changes any of WWE's plans. Of course, I'll keep you guys updated along the way. Wrestling is 24/7, baby. Sometimes there's a lot of major topics, and sometimes there's a lot of big topics that people don't realize. If you just look at it from a different perspective, you'll kind of understand why things are so important. AEW doing Hammerstein Ballroom could really be a clear indicator that maybe WWE will even be more aggressive with going there. But of course, you never really know until it happens.